This is Hamdi Buta's body being set on fire after refusing to fight in Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad's war against rebels who wanted to overthrow him. This is also Hamdi Buta after completing 2 years of compulsory military service in Syria in 2016. Buta left the military to Lebanon in hopes of landing a construction job there after the situation in Syria deteriorated. After working for some time in Lebanon, Buta decided to come back to his family in Syria. So on March 27, 2017, Buta traveled across the border from Lebanon to Syria with a group of young men from his village. Syrian authorities arrested Buta while crossing the border and handed him over to the Syrian military. At this point, members of the group Buta was traveling with notified his brother-in-law in Lebanon. Buta later got in touch with his brother-in-law and told him that members of the Syrian army had taken him to the Al-Draj military camp in the outskirts of the Syrian capital of Damascus. After about a month of training, Buta was apparently deployed to the Tias air base in Homs, also known as the T4 military base, and it is the largest air base in Syria. According to accounts given by relatives and journalists familiar with the case, Buta escaped the T4 military base on foot. Shortly after arriving there, he got lost in the big Syrian desert, so he sent a WhatsApp voice note to his brother-in-law back in Lebanon with difficulty because of the lack of network coverage in the desert. Buta told him about his situation and that he was lost. That was the last time anyone would hear from Buta. It seems that when he got lost, the only place he could find refuge was the Shahir gas field. Forgive me if I just butchered that gas field's name. It's actually in Arabic and I'm African. It was in ruins and it has just been liberated from ISIS, and the guards there were Russian soldiers from a private military company called the Wagner Group who did this to him. So what do we actually know about the Wagner Group, what it does, where it operates, and who is behind it? The group's name is a reference to the German composer Richard Wagner, who was actually Hitler's favorite. The group is secretive and very hard to define, but basically they get paid to send their armed personnel to different countries. You could say that makes them mercenaries, but that definition doesn't always fit with what they do. They are often described as a PMC, a private military company, but that definition doesn't quite fit either, because Wagner isn't just one company. They are better thought as a loose network of companies linked together in an opaque way as possible to make it very difficult to hold them accountable for their actions. In 2014, Russian forces annexed Crimea and began fighting in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region, where most of the current fighting is taking place. A year later, soldiers in unmarked green uniforms showed up on the ground. They were called Little Green Men, but we now know this was likely the first time Wagner soldiers were deployed on the ground. And this group is ruthless. You may have seen that from the video I showed you earlier. But how ruthless are they? Someone may ask. On August 1st, 2022, this small mining town of Solidar in Ukraine had apartments, buildings, houses. Fast forward to January 10th, 2023, and it had turned to rubble. That is how ruthless the Wagner Group is. And we know it's the Wagner Group because that same afternoon, a statement on Telegram surfaced. It came from Yevgeny Prigozhin, a Russian oligarch with close ties to the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. He started out as a caterer, where he got the nickname Putin's chef. But in 2014, he became the head of the Wagner Group, a secret network of mining companies and a brutal private military force. Until recently, the Wagner Group was a top secret operation. One of the functions of the Wagner Group is to deliver weapons and military services to countries with which Russia has military agreements with. Russian law technically prohibits its citizens from fighting for money in foreign countries. But the opaque nature of the Wagner Group has allowed it to recruit thousands and thousands of soldiers, mainly from Russia. In the beginning, you couldn't really distinguish them. But today, the Wagner Group brand is completely recognizable by their emblems, their insignia,
and the online brand.
These guys now are basically like the Amazon of the Russian way of war.
And this new visibility has given us a better look at the strategies they employ to do Russia's dirty work around the world.
The Wagner Group targets countries that are experiencing long conflicts and are weakly governed and corrupt. Take Syria, which has been under authoritarian rule for more than 50 years, and in 2011, a civil war broke out.
A civil war broke out between the Syrian government and anti-government rebel groups.
To fight the rebels, Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad
turned to his Russian ally for help.
Shortly after, Wagner mercenaries appeared in Syria to support the government forces.
Since then, all these countries have seen Wagner troops on the ground,
most of them while going through periods of instability.
This has allowed the Wagner Group to expand its reach to at least 4 different continents, in particular in Africa, where at least 18 different countries have seen Wagner forces on the ground in the last 10 years.
Like Mali, another prime target for Wagner.
Since 2012, Mali has been fighting a jihadist insurgency and has experienced 3 different coups in just 9 years.
For nearly a decade, Mali had military support from France, its former colonizer.
But in 2021, France started to withdraw its army, so Mali contracted Wagner troops to help them fight against the rebels.
Mali denies the deployment of Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group, but
satellite images analyzed by the Center for Strategic and International Studies suggest that they arrived quietly in December 2021 and built a military base and access roads by the airport to facilitate their deployment. In April of 2022, a mass grave in the Malian desert was traced back to the Wagner Group. They have also been linked to other violent attacks in Mali, including here, where they killed about 350 men in March of 2022.
In the town of Mora, Wagner forces and the Mali military are accused of executing several hundred people. A UN report shows that since Wagner's arrival in Mali, civilian deaths have increased by 324%. Once the Wagner Group arrives in fragile countries and intervenes to help dictators, the big question is, what's in it for them?
Typically, the Wagner Group, through a series of shell companies, will get payment in the form of oil or gold, which is exactly what happened in Sudan.
Sudan's relationship with the Wagner Group began in 2017.
At the time, Sudan's then president, Omar al-Bashir, felt his grip on power slipping and met with Putin to establish a new alliance with Russia.
Transcripts show he presented Sudan as Russia's key to Africa.
Soon after they met, Russian military vehicles like this one were spotted on the ground, and videos of Wagner troops training Sudanese soldiers surfaced on social media. In 2019, when al-Bashir was overthrown in a coup, the arrangement persisted,
proving how important Wagner forces have become to the Sudanese army.
And that's because the Wagner Group has a lot to gain. In exchange for providing weapons and training, the Wagner Group operates gold plants like this one, where they exploit Sudan's natural resources.
Getting that kind of high-value commodity that can be quickly turned into cash is a big part of the Wagner Group playbook.
And Sudan is only one example. The Wagner Group's illegal mining activities span the whole continent.
This business model is a targeted effort against countries with weak governance and ongoing security challenges. Oftentimes, authoritarian or military governments with natural resources they can exploit.
Often through mining concessions, diamond mines, gold mines, oil, stuff like that. But it's more than just money. Wagner is a big part of Russia's strategy to build influence on the African continent.
Central African Republic, for example, in 2017, the president turned to Russia for help to fight various rebel groups who wanted to overthrow him. Sounds familiar?
Russia sent weapons, military instructors, and the Wagner troops. Later, companies linked to Wagner was granted diamond and gold mining licenses, and over time, the Wagner Group has become even more prominent in the Central African Republic. We really see them deeply integrated into the running of more or less the country.
There are reports from individuals on the ground that when they reach out to the local version of 911, what they get on the other end are Russian Wagner forces. The UN believes there are now several thousand Wagner operatives in the Central African Republic, and the likelihood of any kind of accountability when it comes to the Wagner Group's activities is next to zero. So that's a snapshot of how Wagner has been operating around the world.